so it can be picked up on the camera. And what I'm going to do now is I've already transferred this drawing to an illustration paper to draw on and shade and render with a pencil. But now that I have this drawn out and laid out the way I want to, I could transfer this to a lot of things. I could transfer this to another Bristol board and ink it. I could transfer it to a watercolor paper and do a watercolor portrait. I could transfer this to like a toothier, grainier art paper, and I could do charcoal on it. Now, if I were going to do something like this in charcoal, I'd probably double the size. You'll find that in charcoal, trying to go small is really, really hard. Pencils are great for doing small drawings. Pencils are horrible for doing big drawings, and the opposite is true for charcoal. So charcoal, you go big, and it doesn't. Charcoal will actually go a lot faster than pencil, even in a double the format, double the size. So I'm going to start working on this in shade. I'll speed up the film. It'll be time-lapse. If there's anything I feel I need to go over, I'll just do a voiceover on it. But pretty much, I'm just going to look at the shadows, I'm going to look at the highlights, and I'm going to start applying my values. So obviously, the paper is the lightest value right now, and no one is the color of paper. So even in your highlights, you're going to have some kind of value shaded in. The other thing is when you're applying your values, you should go with the contours of the face. The contours is the mapping. So as things curve around, your shading approach should be curving with it. If you're coming down this way, again, you want to shade with the contours of the face. So I'm going to begin, and after I'm done with this, I'll scan it in and I'll add it at the end of the video.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm mapping out my values. I'm intentionally going lighter than my end product will be. And my philosophy is I like to build up my values. I don't like to go immediately to dark values. I like to be able to make adjustments. If you go too dark when you're rendering and you're incorrect, the value is just way too dark, you have to erase or you have to start over. Erasing is generally really bad because it will cause smudging, and then depending on the paper, you can tear your paper fibers. So I like to lightly map out where all my values are going to be, my dark values, my mid-tones, and then what I do is once I have that mapped out, I'll go back in with a softer pencil and I will darken all my shadows and midtones, and then I'll come back through with a harder pencil and I'll put in my lighter values. Couple things to keep in mind when you're shading or rendering. You always want to go with the direction of the form. So in this case, our face is round, made up of many round parts. So each part of the face has its own unique shape or form to it. And I want to make sure that when I'm shading along those lines, those cross contour lines, because that's going to help me round out my forms. If you shade against the angles and curves of a form, it's going to come out flat, and it doesn't matter how well you lay down graphite, it's just not going to look good, and it's going to look very flat, and you won't get that three-dimensional look. Couple things to look at when you're watching my hand is when I need to do the lighter values, my hand moves back towards the end of the pencil, and when I need to make darker values, I get lower on the pencil. So these are basic drawing fundamentals that I go over, and just a real quick lesson. The farther back you are on the pencil, the less pressure you're adding to the paper, meaning you're going to get a lighter value. And the farther you move down on the pencil, the more pressure you're going to add and the darker the value. So if you are just using one pencil and you need to control your values, just move up and down on the pencil and you'll have a nice range of values. But in this case, when I'm rendering flesh and I have some really, really light areas, what I do is I'll switch to a harder pencil. So I'll work with a 2H Occasionally 4H, but not often, because I can get a lot of my light values with the 2H. And then when I go with my darker values, my darker midtones, I'll use an HB, and then my dark values, I'll go from a 2B to a 4B. I rarely go 6B. 6B is super soft. The problem once you start going with soft pencils is smudging. And there's a couple of ways to prevent it. One's having a paper underneath your hand like I have there, but that's not a 100% surefire way to prevent smudging, because I did it while I was rendering the hair afterwards. If I wasn't doing a tutorial, I would have started with the hair because it's at the top, and I would have worked left to right, top to bottom. In this case, I'm trying to show how to render the face, and then I'm going to do separate videos for rendering the hair. And when I was doing the hair, I smudged it a bit, so I had to fix it. If you are left-handed, you'd work from the top right and go right to left, and then top to bottom if you're left-handed. And again, at this point, my main goal is to make sure that my drawing is accurate and that I see the shapes of the shadows and I'm able to render those shapes of the shadows. And when I come back in to darken everything, it's already there. It's already mapped out for me. It's a lot easier to go in and render those dark values with confidence because I already have my map that I created. And you're going to see that in the below the lips and the jowls. You'll see it in that cheekbone. You know, that cheekbone's going to be round, so you can have round shadows. You do not want angular shadows in there. And same goes for the eyes and the nose. With a pencil, this is a time-consuming process, so you have to have patience. And we're coming back to the regular part of the video.
Okay, so I've laid out my preliminary values. Now, the drawing is going to be much darker than what you see right now. All I did was with a lighter pencil, so I used a 2H and I used an HB. I went in and basically mapped out my shadows, and this serves two purposes. One, I get a nice layer of pencil on the paper, and then the second thing, it tells me where my darkest values are, where my lightest values are going to be at, so I can work into those values. And when you build layers of pencil, it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. So if you want something really rough, you can kind of skip this process and go right into laying in your darker values and then extending those out to your lighter values. If you want something that's a little bit softer and smoother, you're going to want to build up your values. So there's different types of portraits. With the pencil, you can do a really rough, stylistic type portrait. You could do a really soft, building up layers of values portrait, and then you can kind of do one in between. And the same goes for charcoal, pastel, even in ink, there's a couple of different approaches you can take. So the nice thing about doing this, especially with that grid method, you have your drawing and you can practice a couple of different techniques. So I'm going to continue this video later, and then I'll do the commentary. So all this stuff's going to be sped up except for this talking part, and we'll see how this progresses throughout the week.